2020 was such a special year, but let's start with this statement. So while football does not generate discriminatory behavior, it often replicates the very same social issues that concern any given society. So it really was a pivotal time in 2020 with George Floyd, 2021 with the Kamloops Indigenous bodies found in BC. A lot was happening at that time. You know, the way women are treated in soccer, it's just like, it was a time for reflection and to look at, hey, there's a lot going on, and as a soccer community, how are we doing, and how are we measuring up? So I was going to take this out of here after Dr. Ann went through all of her amazing statistics, but I wanted to leave this up here because even though Kick It Out is a UK-based organization for reporting discriminatory behavior in sports, this is really something that will influence us because the influence of European football is an impact. And this just kind of gives you a visual of, again, I'm not going to break down the statistics, and we definitely will provide this slide so you can read more a little bit about each one, but it shows that it's on the rise, which is really sad, like to have to say, after everything that's happened, and again, this isn't something that we should be doing forever. This is something to get, us on track, be aware, make changes, but the fact that it's rising is a little disheartening. But again, UK-based, a lot of the stats that Dr. Ann shared with us on the keynote were a little bit more general about soccer across Canada. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of background again, as far as DEI, like how it's kind of gotten started here at Ontario Soccer, and what our approach is. So Johnny talked a little bit about the strategy yesterday, if you attended that session. So that's my wheelhouse, like strategy, they break down into goals and KPIs. Sorry, I keep saying KPIs, those are key performance indicators, but that's what we say in the corporate world, but goals and tracking and how are we going to measure our success and make sure that we're always looking from the bottom up. Are we still aligned with those goals and the vision? And from the bottom down, do we have to make changes because things are happening in society and things are changing altogether? So this is a little timeline, and it's kind of funny because as we were building it, I was like, I'm doing stuff, but I didn't realize all the stuff that we're doing and where we were in 2020 and where we are now. So I still even have to look at it because I'm like, wow, we've done quite a bit, accomplished quite a bit. So where we started, we had a diversity advisory subcommittee, and that's where things started. David Miller and Eva Varas helped kind of create that in combination with approval from the board to say, you know what, we realize a lot is changing out there. We can start looking at how we can do better, what we should do. And this subcommittee was created, and it was a call to action to the entire soccer community. So they didn't limit it to say, oh, we only want like 10 people or only these people or that people. We said, whoever's interested, come to the table. And I think we had at one point 45 people that came to the table. We had quite a number of people that stepped up and wanted to be involved. So out of that committee, they came up with some recommendations that were presented to the board, and everybody from their different areas of expertise. We had people that were players, like I said, administrators, everything across the board. They were providing input to like areas of change, and we presented that to the board, and we got the approval. They said, yep, you know what, this is good, this was great work. Let's start a operational anti-racism equity access committee. It's a mouthful. And we kind of looked at how can we execute those items, how can we work on those things to kind of make sure that these changes happen and to bring the awareness. So I think that was the point that I stepped up and I said, okay, I'll do the diversity officer things because I'm like planning, control, vision, stuff like that's my wheelhouse. I want to do this. I want to make sure that we're successful and we're set up for success. So at that point, we started looking at the DEI strategy, which again, Johnny talked about the strategy already, and that was, we provided some input into that strategy and kind of started to break down what are some of the key areas for change and where we're going to focus on. We also started thinking about training really early on. So I don't know if anyone here attended a match official training. We did actually do a little pilot of a match official training, and we had a really good turnout. It was online because I think it was post-COVID, but it was still like a weird time, so we just did it online, but we had a lot of feedback, and all that feedback that was provided, like, we actually looked into as we were building out the education program, so that was really good. 2023, we continue with the DEI strategy. Again, we've started to look at, we're working closely with Patty and the internal folks at practices and policies. So like anything within Ontario Soccer to say, okay, anything that kind of relates to this DEI work we're doing, whether it's definitions, racism, all these things, discrimination, how are we doing there? Can we take a look at those things again? And that was the focus. And then it brings us to 2024 right now, which our key focus again is to work on training. So our focus is training and to get the training to be done right across the board for everyone and make that available. So that's one of the things we're working on. I just want to highlight too while we're here, some of the things, again, people look at with DEI and you got to be a very patient person to work into DEI. Things aren't going to happen overnight. So even though I have 2020 there, the numbers are going to go on, unfortunately, until we get to the point where our numbers aren't going up and they start going down. But I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the key things that we were able to contribute to the operations at Ontario Soccer. So I have to make this list because we were talking about all of them earlier. So the land acknowledgement that you guys heard at the beginning of the session, we provided input into that. I know that when I was doing the Southwest Soccer, I helped them with at the beginning of the games, we did the land acknowledgement. So again, that was never in place before the committee came along. The presence of a more diverse board, I like to think that we had a little bit of input into that. We actually would help with the nominations committee as far as interviews. Our committee also created a self-identifying survey. Again, you don't have to fill it out, but I think we had 80 to 90% participation, so we actually got a good representation in data. And potential candidates, which we talked to in advance, they all filled it out, and we just highlighted with the board the importance of diversity, and the directors the importance of diversity when it comes to creating unique perspectives. Talked to Johnny a few times about internal HR perspective, like, you know, we're asking people to do some stuff outside, but look in your house first. You're saying to everyone, you want to promote DEI, how are you representing DEI? So not just from we have players. How about your administrators? How about like other people within Ontario Soccer itself? How about the board? Like, you want to actually have it throughout, and it's not something that you're just checking a box to say, yeah, we've got diversity, cover. Like, that authenticity comes from showing that, hey, we mean this, and you can see that we're actually practicing this through and through. So those are just some of the key things. So again, I mentioned that when we broke up into the committees, we actually kind of broke down the areas of focus, and these are some of them that I talked about again, but with leadership, we know like the diverse perspectives, how important they are for decision making, so that was like the key thing. And then if you go back again to the strategy, we were aligned because we said like, we've got to make sure that the leaders are helping us with this message, and this message is resonating throughout. So as far as the leadership within Ontario Soccer and the board, like, this isn't really important, right? We don't want to be dealing with the aftermaths of all the stuff that we hear in the media when there's something we can do right now. Like, we don't want to just be doing it because we have to do it. We want to be proactive about it and say, we're doing it already. You don't even have to look at our house. So for procedures and policies, again, is there anything discriminatory behaviors that's happening? Look at that. Education and training. Aparna will get a little bit into more what our modules are, but that was an area of focus that we talked about. Communication. So one of the key things, we actually had a subgroup when we had the original committee said, you know what, we noticed Ontario Soccer, like specifically, because again, we were kind of like looking at how we put things out. They're like, I don't really feel represented in the material that's being put out there. Like, I don't see my kids and like the ads and things that were a thing. Like, I don't feel that. And that was a perspective from someone in the committee, and that's what we asked for, one of their feedback. So that was something we said, just be aware of that. Like, you know, make sure when you are putting things out, look at your soccer community. Are they reflected in everything? Can you see them through and through? So that was something that we kind of highlighted that people want to see. And then from a communication perspective, engage with the community, right? So people say, well, I don't have those people trying out, or people like that aren't coming. Well, how are you engaging them? How are you working with them? Who are you talking to? Where can you go and find those people? Like, those are the things where it just can't stop at, well, I don't and I can't. Like, you gotta kind of push yourself, so that's what it's about. And then access is like the opportunity for everybody to be able to participate. So again, I won't go over this too much, but this was a breakdown of what we had in the strategy, so ensure everyone has fair and equitable access to all parts of the game. Breaking that down, again, always aligning, okay, what does that mean from a metric? How can we measure that? How can we see that we're being successful and we're doing better? So understanding that part of it. Again, starting with leadership, we talked about having a diverse board, reviewing the policies, promoting DEI at all levels of operation. So again, it's, you know, all levels. One of the slides that Dr. Ann had put up was about, and it was again, like, I think that was more corporate than it was nonprofit, but it was showing that the entry positions and then the VP positions, and then if you see kind of like their trajectory, like those opportunities aren't there in those leadership positions. And that's something that like is just across, doesn't matter what business, it's everywhere. It's in the corporate world, it's in the nonprofit world, it's everywhere. So look for those opportunities for that promotion, or bringing people in, or letting people rise to the top and giving them opportunities to be successful. Again, at the bank, I'll just give you a quick example. We have a mentee-mentor relationship. So there's leaders that I worked with that kind of, they partner with you and say like how they got to the top, like what they had to do, some of the behavior, some of the relationships. Those are things I know, again, might not be exactly in this world, but if there is a mentor or somebody that you can look to or to pair with, or you know, if there's somebody that you see that has lots of potential, take those opportunities to guide that person so that they can have the opportunities that you have at the top, that you have to get to where you are. So no tolerance for discrimination. So it's kind of sad that you even have to write that, but no, it wasn't there. It wasn't a part of it at one point either. So really kind of recognizing that these things are happening, and implementation of the complaint system. So again, a lot of that was talked about yesterday by Michelle and Allison, but the current ways to do something, but hopefully get to a point where we have a centralized system that people can report on. Even the first page that I put up there for the kick it out, you can actually go on their site, report an incident, classify it, and even like goes back to data again. You have that data to say, oh, we're not doing well in this area. You know what, actually we improved in this area, but we can't do that if everything's so fragmented. So I know that's something that is being worked at right now for the implementation of the complaint systems, but it would be really great to say that there's a problem. Right now, people can assume there's a problem, but unless you have the data, you can't really prove anything, you can just assume. So implementing the changes in policies and practice, so I know that we've provided input to like areas where things need to be updated, changed, or reflected to what's happening today. This actually is to answer some of the questions that we got online about the grassroots approach to DEI, and a lot of people are saying, okay, so what can I do? How can I help? Aparna has a lot of information too, but just at a high level, the community engagement, like look for opportunities to engage with the community. We had a hot topic, because data is such a big theme here, about demographics last night, and census data is a good starting point for who's in your neighborhood, like different people. But the thing I don't like about census data is kind of static, and look at how quickly things are changing. Look how quickly things are changing. Like, people are coming, and it's just changed so much. So that's good, but I think if we can get to a point to use the data that we have in the clubs, again, centralized systems that we don't, registration systems that we don't have, but if we get to that point, then we can start using that data to say, hey, you know, maybe we could do better here, or maybe we can start this program, or you know what, we moved the mark here, we want to focus here. We don't have that data to compare to, so I think that's, if the clubs have opportunities to be part of registration systems or whatever that is more consolidated, then that's something we can start reporting on. Newcomers, again, like I'm a first generation Canadian, but my parents came to Canada. They were from Jamaica to England to here. So most of my siblings were born in England and Manchester, and I was born here, me and my brother were born here. But newcomers seek out people within their community that have the same culture as them, have the background, language. So I know a lot of Jamaican people in my community because my parents know their parents, and that's how we reach out to each other. So community events, multicultural centers, those are really good places to start partnering, engaging with different communities. Representation from the community within, so then I talked about like your field or the players or whoever's in the community should be reflected through all levels. Are we walking the talk and talking to the talk? Do people actually look like who's on the field? So welcoming and inclusive, so do you have the inclusive environment? Like I said, look in the mirror at yourself individually and as an organization. Are you welcoming? Are you kind of like putting your barriers up to not allow people in? Check your biases and your values and beliefs, and be open to supporting your staff and training and learning more about like topics like racism, ableism, discrimination, like understand what that is. Feedback and data, so again, a lot of talk about data, but some methods, I don't know, the SurveyMonkey, MS Forums, there's so much from technical background, there's a Tableau, like there's just so many different ways that you can get information. So that's a good place to start, is to get feedback. Town halls or meetings, communication goes both ways, so again, this is just a presentation for everybody, but have an area where like parents can talk to you, players can talk to you, get their feedback, because if you're just going to say I'm going to implement this and do this and that without the engagement from the community and the communication, you might be putting in something that it's not a good fit for people, or some people aren't interested in. Focus groups, so talked a little bit about the focus groups and experts. There's a table of experts right here, and resources. So again, I'm not claiming to be the DEI know-it-all of everything, but it's something I'm passionate about. I read books, I get engaged. Last year I went to the OUA I think it was the first one, yeah, diversity conference. So I got like perspective from players from the university, and then working with different people across the group. So obviously this weekend was a great weekend for reaching out. And then there's some resources that I'll put links to, like the Sports Information Resource Center and Canada Soccer Idea. They have a page now that helps you get newcomers involved. And then skill-based experts, like I said, like diverse team, right? You don't want a team of all DEI people. You want people who can do all different things. That's what makes a team successful. Talking a little bit about access, because I don't want to lose that part of it, and access is really important for the ability for people to be involved, not creating those barriers and really looking across everybody. Like, I think we were talking a little bit about like not the best of the best and just forget about everybody else. Like, there's opportunities for everybody. Everybody wants to be involved. Make sure that that people feel welcomed and there's no barriers for them to be able to participate. So I'm going to hand it over to Aparna right now to talk about feedback. Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you first, because it's, sticking around on the last day of the summit is a great thing. I know you're all tired. It's been wonderful. I've been at a lot of academic conferences, but this environment is just so energizing. Those environments can be a bit dry, but and also, if you want to talk about competition, just go to an academic conference. It's cutthroat. So you can get a lot of feedback, is how I'll call it. You get a lot of feedback, a ton of feedback. You learn a lot about feedback as a professor, and from your students too. And that's all good. You want to be challenged. You always want to be challenged. So I have to put glasses on now because I'm old. So there are various ways that discrimination in sports is addressed by institutions and organizations. And through policy, evidence gathering, program evaluation, messaging in the way that Sandra has just discussed. Sandra is really a metrics person. She's an evidence person. She wants facts. She wants to, and both of us want to convince you that diversity, equity, inclusion, and taking a critical approach to those things is important. And it's not just important, for sports, but it's important for society. That we do want to live in a just society. We do want to level the playing field for everyone. And so, even though we have different approaches, mine is educational, very qualitative, very anecdotal, very storytelling, sometimes gets off track. We see the value in both. This has been a really data-heavy, like I got vertigo from some of the numbers and this and the planning and I think it's all necessary. But at the end of the day, soccer is relational. It's an interrelational, intersubjective. It's a very subjective sport. What one coach thinks is good playing is not what the other coach thinks is good playing. We have attack minded coaches who love the attack game, and we have other groups, immigrant groups who really like possession, really like tiki-taka games. And those are conflicts, but they're also ethnic, political, social conflicts. They're not just conflicts of the game. They're all inflected by the world. And so when we heard Fakunda talk yesterday about how it's important to situate the game in global events, political events, soccer's always been highly political itself. It started out as an elite game, in England, with the elite universities, and so it's been classist, it's been sexist. All of those things have entered into the game because that's what society is too. The other thing that people kind of leave out, because there's so many redemptive things about soccer, and that's why we're in it. It's a beautiful game, but when there's a conflict or a war, the first thing that happens is people are herded up in the soccer pitch. Like soccer is just an amazing thing in so many ways because it's so reflective of real life. So for us, the implementation of the measures comes largely through education. I think it's, as Sandra had said, it's slow work. It's slow work. I've been doing it in teacher education for the last 20 years, and we're just coming around to people like actually believing that there's issues, because teachers are like, we love kids. We all love kids, but loving them is not enough. You have to know who they are. You have to know who their parents are. You have to know, their religion, their social practices outside of school, especially in school. It's harder for coaches. Sometimes you see them three times a week, an hour at a practice, and then you're getting ready for the game, and that's your goal, So any little things you can learn about kids along the way, and I know that coaches do this all the time, but that really means a lot to the players. So that's why education is so important, because coaches also are educators. They're not educators like teachers are, but they give life lessons, and that's what education is. You might think it's like learning science or learning math. It's not. It really is about the life lessons. So there have been a number of high-profile events in sports that have sped up the need for culture change, and that's really our focus, is changing cultures. And Michelle and Allison talked about, there's very harmful things that happen in cultures of discrimination. There's actual racist attacks and things that happen. But it's the ordinary culture that we really want to change, the ordinary everyday interactions, because then that will prevent the more heightened ones. And so you've seen every day now another sports organization has been, called out by the news, Hockey Canada, gymnastics, soccer has been called out, Whitecaps, you've probably heard, Vancouver Whitecaps, all of the kinds of issues of predation and all of those things that have been happening. And so we want to be preemptive. And Ontario soccer's been, you know, I've actually been surprised, but it's been pretty great that, you know, that we've been proactive. I don't know who it was today was talking about gratitude, but I have been very grateful to be in this group that Sandra was talking about, first from the grassroots. I just came in as a volunteer. One of the parents at the club that my kids were at said, you should really join this group. And I said, I don't know, you know, I'm not an athlete. You know, I didn't play soccer. My kids all play, and my husband is hugely athletic. But I did have something to offer in terms of sports education in this area. So my views, you know, my views on the kind of education that's needed to eradicate discrimination is based on decades' work with teachers in the school system. I'm a professor of education. I'm a York alumni, and I'm a York professor. I work at the Faculty of Education. I was the grad program director, but I'm done thank God, my stint at that. I'm not a good administrator. I'm not even a good parent because I can't get anybody to do anything. So I'm glad not to be in charge of anybody. My life work has been to educate teachers on uneven playing fields for learning, growing, and opportunity. Issues of equity are so key to providing quality education for our children and youth in school, and particularly for those living in marginalized, underserved, and newcomer communities. So I bring a critical approach. I really feel like you just have to read a lot to get a critical approach, and you have to reflect, and you have to constantly reflect on yourself and how you're interacting with people. Sports tends to bring out our worst angels. It's brought out my worst angel, like when I'm watching my kids, and then all of a sudden I feel really violent, and like just want to, you know, get that and say stuff. I mean, I've seen it, and I've seen it, and I've experienced it. I've participated in the culture of sport that is so highly competitive, because I have highly competitive players, and when they're kids, it's 100 times worse. Like, the way that one would behave. Like if I went to go see Messi, I'd be quiet on the side, you know, but when it's my kid, you know, that I think is Messi, who is not, it gets, you know, it can get quite testy. So I really have started all of this work from the point of observation, and I suggest that you do that too as coaches and TDs and even board members. Go and sit with the parents. You want a real education on discrimination, you know, sexism. Just sit with them. Just sit. I don't have to give you any numbers. You will be convinced. You will be convinced that we need to address discrimination in sport. Sit with parents. Sit with, you know, watch players. Just observe. You don't even have to say a word, and you will know. You will get the anecdotal, qualitative evidence you need. So that I don't have to convince you that we need to do anti-discrimination in sports. So I want to say one more thing. The first vantage point that I bring to this is education. As an educational prof, as somebody who's an expert in education, child development. And child development goes out the window sometimes, so you know that. You're in the grocery store, your child has a tantrum. You don't think about, you know, what you were taught about how to deal with children. You're telling me, you be quiet right now. You know, you forget they're hungry. So child development can only help you in theory. Like when you're in front of a kid and you're trying to help them out and you can't help yourself, you know, it's hard. And so all of this takes a lot of thinking about. The other vantage points from the parent, which I've already leaked into. And a parent of 4 kids played all different levels of soccer. My husband refused to put any of our kids in hockey because he was a white boy from Palmerston. Like nobody knows where that is, even I know.
Come on.
And all they could play was hockey. They had nothing else. That's all. And he loves sports. And he had a terrible, terrible experience. And he's extremely athletic, like he's a varsity tennis player, and so he would not allow our kids to play hockey. So we put them in soccer. And we started out just grassroots, you know, and experienced barriers from day one. You're not from here. We don't know who you are. Your kid doesn't seem fit, you know. All of these things, right, happen when you're an outsider in going into a sports organization, right? And my kid, she saw these kids all wearing the same shirt. She was not playing house league anymore. She was like, I'm playing that. I want to be in that. So that's why I'm here, because this one kid wanted to play select. Then the other kids played house league. We had one in regional and one in OPDL. And so my second entry point is through my children. And you know, you're emotional about your children. You know, you're emotional about other people's children. Okay, so I want to also say that the arena of sports is one of the most terrifying arenas I've ever been in as a parent. And the emotion, the passion, the intensity, that drives you to the games. But it's also what's really, you know, it's addictive for kids too. And so it keeps them in it. And so I'm really, really dedicated to changing the culture of sports. Okay. We can go on to the next.
Okay.
I can finally talk about EDI now. I just wanted to make sure that I situated myself. Is that where we stand? Okay. I think we have what is EDI? Yeah, what is EDI? Okay, here we go. Yes. So what is DEI? And you hear a different EDI, you hear DEID. It did start out as a branding. It started out with business and branding, and so in business, they started to realize that they were having problems with intercultural conflict, and now it's brought into every business, every organization. And it's really not critical because it's part of a branding project, but what it's helped for scholars like me to do is to try to bring a more critical approach to thinking about all of these things. So diversity, of course, refers to ranges, differences in human beings. People aren't diverse, so I'm not a diverse person. Communities and groups of things are diverse, because sometimes you say, oh, we're bringing in the diversity person. No, we're bringing in somebody who is of this ethnicity to increase diversity in our organization. So equity is the allocation of resources. Equity intervenes into the idea that we all need to be equal. We do all need to be equal, and equal treatment is really important, but we don't all start out from an equal place. So somebody who's a newcomer to Canada doesn't have the kinds of resources and cultural capital, which is really, really important. And whenever you go into a new community, you realize I don't have social bonds. I don't know where the recreational services are. I don't speak the language. I don't have any friends here, right? And so that kind of capital is really so important for human belonging. Without resources and without kinship ties, you're not at a deficit, but you don't have what other people have. And so when kids start out in school or in sports, and they don't have resources like that, and they don't have contacts, ties, no one knows who they are, it's harder for them. And then inclusion, the idea that everyone belongs. Everyone is invited, everyone can participate. They don't have to participate in the same way, but they can participate. Okay. What do I do? You know, I'm so bad.
She's a professor of tech.
I hate technology. I never do PowerPoint. So okay, this is Sandra. Sandra said we have to have a PowerPoint. Why DEI is important. Soccer's for everyone. What does DEI address? Inequality, discrimination, barriers and harm in sport. How can we improve being aware of the issues? Changing sports cultures is the approach that that I would take and that I'd bring to the committee. Yeah.
We should have.
Okay, DEI addresses systemic equity, inequity actually, I should say. DEI addresses a systemic inequity. And why we focus on systemic is because so many things these days in every arena of controversy or conflict is now being weaponized on a personal level. Everything is personalized, so it's people against people, groups against groups. But what DEI really is supposed to do is address things at a systemic level. So systemic inequity refers to the presence of persistent and unjust disparities in opportunities, resources, and outcomes for certain groups within a society or institution. Now, I've been in a lot of groups. Academia is one group, and the other group that really resembles academia to me is soccer, and they both trigger me in different ways, right? But soccer has always seemed to be like a closed society. The transparency sucks in soccer. You can't get anyone to answer a question. Like, you know, I have parents asking me, like, how did some kids get picked for this and some kids? Nobody knows, right? I'm the manager of the team, and I don't know. And it's always like this. There's no answer for any question that involves the fairness, that involves everybody getting what they think they need or want to need. And I don't know why that is, but it is similar to academia because you don't know what's going on there either. So I have some clues. It's a little bit maybe about gatekeeping, a little bit about wanting to promote excellence. Wanting to promote excellence means you have to exclude some things. And it's recognizing that that's going to go on, and that's going to happen. And it's also telling people it's going to happen. Your kid's not going to get picked for everything. And these are the reasons. But we're not there yet from what I can see. And I've been a parent in soccer for 20 years, and I didn't know what was going on then, and I don't know what's going on now. And it's been 20 years. Okay, so inequities are a result of deeply ingrained and systemic practices, policies, and norms. So when I'm saying secret society, that's a practice, right? So but there's other things too. There's policies or there's no policies. The most inequitable environments I have noticed don't have policies. Somebody's making it up. You ask them a question, they make it up, right? And when they say, we don't need policies, we don't need plans, I think Johnny alluded to plans yesterday, we don't need organization, we don't need public documents, that's a red flag. That means the organization is making it up. And who's making it up? The people with power. And who are the people with power? The people who've been there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And who are they letting in? Their friends. I mean, the nepotism is at the grounds of discrimination. It just is. In every, people think it's social hatred, but it's really like keeping my people at the top, right? And so that's what systemic equity is. It isn't a person. It's a whole system. So, unlike individual acts of discrimination, and we talked a little bit about that in Michelle's session yesterday, about like individual litigated cases. Systemic inequity operates on a large scale, permeating various aspects of society, education, healthcare, employment. I mean, if you think about, if I use healthcare as an example, there was a time when that every kind of ailment, like you get a rash, you get red skin. Well, for racialized people, their skin doesn't always turn red. And so this is like a simple example of how the medical profession is, their object of diagnosis is, you know, white male and females, and then racialized people, you know, their symptoms are different. Illness looks different across different groups. Illness looks different for children, looks different for adults, looks different for grandparents. But we have this normative system, and this is what tells you, you know, what your illness is. So that's how we talk about, why we talk about systems. And these inequities often result from historical patterns, you know. So when someone says, it's always been, this is the way we always do it, of course it is. That's how you answer, that's how I answer always. Of course it's still always the way you've done. That's why it's not fair, right? Yeah. So, a focus on education and training. So, we are addressing discrimination in soccer by acknowledging inequities and reference. No, did we do this one? We did this one. This is a dumb one. Yeah. Where are we? Oh yeah, here we are. Yeah. So, we have already developed a module. And we don't want the module to be the same as what the respect group does, because that's a different kind of focus towards respect, and anti-discrimination are not the same thing. And we don't want to also conflate that with mental health, which is like happening in the university right now. Because racism is not an individual experience, right? It can be, individuals respond and experience it to it differently, but it really is a societal issue. So our new education and training for DEI has started, and it's included workshops and modules on implicit bias with gender and racial discrimination, familiarizing all stakeholders with types and definitions of discrimination, removing barriers to participating in soccer at all levels, providing educational training with DEI at all levels of participation in Ontario soccer, and collaborating with research groups examining discrimination in sports. And I did want to say a little bit about our educational strategy. So as part of the educational strategy at Ontario Soccer, we have been piloting our DEI workshop with district clubs, and we're really lucky. Is it Pradipta, Patty? And is Pradipta the club president? He's the club president? I should know this. But Pradipta at Richmond Hill, the club president, agreed to let us do this training. And taking a chance. I mean, it's a pilot, so we're really appreciative of that. So along with the critical awareness definitions and policies that I just talked about, we also use media examples, case stories to try to make some of these points come alive. And I mean, there's so many stories. I mean, even just watching the David Beckham documentary on Netflix, so this is a guy that soccer is made for, right? And you can see how many struggles, challenges, the ways in which he was treated, the way he was not allowed to have a life of his own. It's got to tell people there's something wrong with the culture, right? And then that's exacerbated across racial lines, across gender lines. That kind of treatment is experienced differently in an intersecting way. And so I try to use a lot of stories, and stories are not, they're not metrics, and they're very subjective. But I do think it's really, really important. So one story I like to tell is about when my 5-year-old, the third daughter, who's very intent on playing at a very competitive level, which I think like I talked to some former D1 players yesterday, and I was thinking, no way, like there's no way I'm putting my kid in that. Anyways, when she was about 5 or 6, we took her to her rep soccer practice, and this was after a few weeks she's been observing, and she says, "Mommy, why? Why do we have this little corner of the field and the boys get everything? Why?" I said, "I don't know. You got to ask your coach that." She says, "I'm not asking them. I want you to ask them." And I said, well, I don't really know the answer, I said to her. Like, we would have to ask them, right? And she said, well, I know what the answer is. They like the boys better. They like the boys better. And I said, that could be the answer. Like, I mean, and then I was talking to the D1 players last night, And they were telling me about their schedule, which is brutal. But they said the other thing that really stuck out to me that they said was they always got the latest field time. So they had to practice from 7 to 9, the girls, and they asked the men's team to switch. Could you alternate? Nope, this is the way we've always done it. And they said to me they had to practice from 7 to 9 and be up at 5 in the morning to do training. I mean, come on. That's like the Army. And these kids are in university.
Well, it's not for fun.
It still should be fun university. And my university was, very fun because I'm not an athlete. Anyways, I tell these stories to convince you, to try to convince you that some of the practice, it's not all of them. Because why did I send my kid to sports? Why would a parent send their kid to sports? We send them there because we know in every other arena of social life, they're being spoiled like crazy, like even us parents, and it's not good. It's not good not to have high expectations of kids. It's not good for them not to have rules. It's not good for them not to have structure. We appreciate the coaches who give our kids discipline. We know that's a hard job to do because we're failing at it as parents. So I don't want that part of sports to change, but I do want anything that's punitive, humiliating, unreasonable, like running around a field when it's 110 degrees out and you're 7 years old. I've seen it. Unreasonable, unsafe. We want that out of sports. Discriminatory. We want it out. We want to produce a culture that's high expectations and also supportive, in a supportive manner, even if that's tough, right? Yeah. Okay. And then, so where was I?
You were explaining that even though the parents can't do it, the coaches should.
Well, I think that's great. Like, I think that's a great observation. We have to educate the parents too, and I've always been to that. Because the parents have such unreal expectations. And coaches don't get paid a lot. Some get paid.
A lot of them are parents.
Right.
Like, none of ours get paid.
Yeah, so, yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Providing educational training with DEI at all levels of participation in Ontario soccer, that we want to do that at every level. And, even with fan behavior, I think it's really important. And collaborating with research groups. That's an area we haven't gotten to. I mean, Sabrina's going to come up and we're trying to make the case that she should work with us. She likes us already though, so it's not going to be a hard case. But other groups, York University could be a group. We have SHIRT grants, there's social science grants, there's health grants, there's sports grants. They're all available to clubs too. If clubs want to do these initiatives, you can apply for a grant. And it makes sense because then you can start doing research in your own local environment, which isn't the same as the total environment. So last thing I want to say is that Sandra and I have been gathering up resources, and not just her and I, but the committee. We've reached out to lots of community groups for help. Did you want to say something about Black History Month?
Oh, that was one of the things actually that, one of the things the groups, the committee suggested was there's different, on the side, there's different events that happen culturally, religiously, not so much religiously, we don't get to that, but more culturally, like, events through the month and just recognizing them. And that's something that a lot of companies do, but that's something that we were deliberate about, like what do we want to recognize, how do we want to celebrate with our community. And it's Black History Month, I haven't heard much about it, so I just say acknowledge and appreciate all the contributions that Black athletes, administrators, anybody in the community has made, just to acknowledge that, because it's only 1 month, and we should be recognizing the contributions they've made to soccer.